Recording in progress.
Welcome everybody to Wildcard Wednesday. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, and I'm Stacy Buck, President and Senior Consultant at RadRx. So I am back again with another edition of Wildcard Wednesday, and I have two cases that I'm going to feature this week. And actually, these are shorter cases and a little more straightforward. And I'm thankful because I am buried under a huge audit this week. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the ones that came in. The last time I asked for cases, I did receive more cases, so thank you to everyone that sent them in. And so today I'm covering two cases that came in that recent batch. So the first case that came in was for an embolization of a left groin pseudoaneurysm. And I put the question on the report that was included with the report. And the question was, would this procedure be coded with 37242, 76937, 99152 when angioseal is used instead of thrombin? So this situation is a little bit, different than what you would normally see. They're actually using the angioseal, which is used, that vascular plug is used at the end of a procedure to seal the vessel that was accessed for the procedure. But in this instance, it's being used as part of the embolization procedure. That is actually how they are treating this pseudoaneurysm in this particular patient. So anyway, let's look at the report. It's really just one brief paragraph under the technique there. We start out and we see that we have ultrasound guidance being performed. So we have a 76937 with the documentation requirements being met for that. Then the physician gains access to the left groin pseudoaneurysm. So right now we have a non-selective catheterization. Then we see that the catheter was advanced, it says into the left groin pseudoaneurysms. And then it mentions that a glide wire, using a glide wire, the left common iliac was catheterized and an angiogram was performed. So if we're still on that left side, we're still going to be at that non-selective catheterization position. And what we're going to see in a moment is that the embolization is going to take place with that angioseal. And with our embolization codes 37241 through 37244, non-selective catheterization is going to be bundled with those codes. So we don't have anything for the catheterization. And then you see after the angiogram was performed, then we see that the angioseal was advanced over the wire and deployed at the region of the left groin, pseudoaneurysm, fistula, neck. So for this particular case, I feel comfortable using the embolization code. There really isn't anything else that would fit here. And when we look at the embolization codes, they're actually for embolization and occlusion. If you look at them, and they don't specify how the embolization has to be performed. So I would code this with the 37242. And then quickly, I skipped over the sedation codes. If you're coding for prophy, you're going to do the 99152. And then if you're coding for the facility, of course, you would get the additional time, the 99153 times 3. So to the person who sent in this case, yes, I would code it the way that you recommend. I agree with that. Okay, so now let's go down to case 2. So I actually cut this down. I didn't include all the documentation that was sent in or the full question. I just kind of cut to the chase on this. In this case that was submitted, the main question that's being asked is, can we use 36246 and 37246 for this surgery? So this is a lower extremity revascularization procedure. Because it says it's not for stenosis or occlusion for lower leg revascularization. I think the reason for the exam, peripheral vascular disease, was wrong. So I agree that that is not correct for the indication for the exam when you look at this note. So what we actually had was this patient had undergone a TAVR procedure. You see that in the clinical history. And then during that TAVR procedure, the patient had this femoral artery injury because of that. And so now the interventional radiologist is going to see the patient for this particular issue. So when we look at the details of the report, because this is really the main question is, do we use the lower extremity revascularization codes for stenosis or occlusion, or do we use the regular angioplasty code? So when we get into this report and we're actually looking at the procedure that was done, I confirm that angioplasty was performed. I want you to focus on, first of all, the fact that I see the left common femoral artery injury in that clinical history. That tells me right there, and they're coming from that other procedure that happened during the other procedure with the other doctor. Right there, the reason why they're being referred for the procedure is the left common femoral artery injury. But if there's any confusion because you have reason for exam PVD and then you have the clinical history injury, you want to look at the details of the report to confirm which one it was, because there is a mention of stenosis, with this particular patient. But if you look at that completion angiography there, it says repeat angiography demonstrated complete resolution of any extravasation. So that is what they were treating the injury. And so now this imaging is confirming that the procedure was successful. So it actually wasn't focused on treating a stenosis, even though in this particular part of the report, it does mention that there's a focal stenosis at the access site, but the primary reason for performing the procedure was to repair that injury, and that confirmatory angiography lets us know that yes, this is what they were checking for, and the procedure was successful. So that's going to be coded with 37246 for the angioplasty for this particular case. And then for our catheterization code, backing up a little bit, the access for the right common femoral artery was used. And so then the catheter goes across the aortic bifurcation over into the left extremity. And then that catheter gets placed in the left common femoral artery where the angioplasty is performed. So that is a second order vessel for that. So the codes for this case are 36246 and 37246. And then again, if we look down at the impression, it says successful angioplasty, left common femoral artery injury, status post large bore access. So everything in the body of this report confirms that it was for injury, even though that reason for exam says PVD. So that's clearly what it was for, based on the fact the patient had the TAVR, which caused the injury, and then they got referred to IR for that fix. So those are the two cases for this week. So I hope you found those interesting. I hope you found them helpful. For those of you, who didn't submit the cases, maybe this will help you with some future cases that you may come across. I particularly liked this one because it's very rare that we see in the lower extremities that we're using a 37246. And so I liked this example for this reason. So everybody, thank you for tuning in, and I'll be back next week with some more cases. Have a great week.